Hi, this is Greg from Business Automated. Today I'll show you how to send nicely formatted emails from Airtable using SendGrid. We will do it in two different ways. First of them by pressing a button. Second one will be scheduling emails to be sent later. Let's get to it. Let's start first with the format of Airtable that we'll be using for sending the emails. You can see that we are having here field column with the first name, let's say the name of our customer. We're having also the email of this customer. Here we have a subject line where we can customize the subject line, and we are having some personalization text that we'll be adding later inside of SendGrid email. Now, before we continue with any automation, I wanted to let you know that there's also a built-in app from SendGrid inside of Airtable. When you click on Add Apps and look for SendGrid, you can find it here. This is also a legitimate way to send emails, and it's fairly straightforward to use. What it does not allow you to do is to use dynamic templates from SendGrid. So you would have to paste the HTML of the email here, which is also possible, but I think it's slightly easier to basically use the dynamic templates and automations so that we can modify the look of the email inside of SendGrid. Okay, so having said that, let's move on to SendGrid now, and let's create dynamic template that will contain those fields. So I already have SendGrid open over here, and I am on dynamic templates. The first step here will be to create a new dynamic template. Now we have created the template. Now we need to add a version, which will be the actual HTML that will be visible to our clients. We can create a blank template from the scratch, or we can go into SendGrid and use one of the ready-made designs over here. For that, we are going to use the Welcome Lisa template as a welcome email. We will use the code editor so that we can edit the code and we can add the HTML, but you could also use the design editor. That doesn't matter for this case. Okay, you can see that we have already our template here, and the fields that we would like to customize is, for example, here first name. So what we are going to do, we are going to click on the name here, Lisa. We're going to find this here inside of the code, and we are going to change it to first name with double curly brackets. This will be the name of our variable that we'll be substituting with our dynamic text. Remember that the names of the variables needs to be as a single string without any spaces in between. That will complicate things for SendGrid. Okay, so once we have this template placeholder here, let's go to the test data. Inside of the test data, we'll use a JSON format to fill in this information. So let's open curly bracket and let's close them straight away so that we don't forget. And let's put the name of the variable that we have typed, and let's put this in brackets so that we don't forget the brackets. First name, and then colon, and then also in brackets the name of the person that we would be sending this to. Okay, so now we have the first dynamic field. The second field that we would like to customize is the text over here. So let's go back, let's click on the text, and now we can see here the white text. So let's substitute this as well, and let's put double curly brackets, text. Okay, there is nothing here, so let's copy this text, and inside of our JSON we'll add another variable. So we'll do quotation mark and let's write text, and inside will be our longer text. Okay, this is just to show you that what the text will look like visually, so that you can see that this will be the information that we'll be substituting dynamically from our Integromat, from our Airtable. Okay, another variable that we would like to substitute is the subject. So we would like to customize the subject. To customize the subject, we are going to go to here to the subject, and instead of the fixed subject, we are also going to use placeholder curly brackets, and we're going to call it subject. Okay, version 1. You can see that the subject of the email has disappeared, so let's also add it here. You can see that there is an error in the data. This is because every variable, every different placeholder needs to be separated by comma. So if you see error like this, just make sure to check whether you have commas, whether you have all the quotation marks. Okay, so we have a nice looking template with placeholders. So now the next step will be to get this information into placeholders from our Airtable. So the first step will be to create a send email button. We're going to select field button. We're going to call it send email. And in our case, what the button does, it basically opens a URL. And this URL will be a webhook to which we'll send the information about each row. Now the question is, how do you get a URL to send this information? We need to create a webhook, and for that we'll use Integromat. Integromat is a software that allows to integrate easily different APIs, so you can go check out their website and start with a new scenario here. So we'll skip the entry page and start by creating a new webhook. Here you select a custom webhook and add a new webhook that will be used for this particular purpose. We're going to call it send emails via SendGrid. Okay, so now you have an email. Now you have URL. You can copy this URL over here and go back to SendGrid and then insert that URL here, but you have to make sure that you're putting quotation bracket because this is a text. Okay, and now at the end of this URL, you're going to make a question mark and then write record ID equals, and then we're going to use ampersand, and we're going to find the record ID of this particular row by using the record ID function. Okay, so let's go back to Integromat. Let's click OK, and let's start this scenario. Let's press run once, and let's go back to Airtable. And now, the moment when you click the button, it will open a new URL, new window with the record ID of the record that we have selected. So going back to Integromat, you can see that we have retrieved here that information about that particular record. We could add all the other information that we need to the URL inside of the button here, and we could do it directly here, but it's actually easier and faster to use Airtable module to take the record ID and retrieve all the other information that are needed inside of Airtable. So in this case, inside of Integromat. So in this case, let's go to Airtable and let's select get a record. Okay. Here you will have to first add the connection to the Airtable, which is fairly straightforward, just requires the name of the connection and your Airtable API key. Once this is done, select the relevant base and select the table from which this information is coming from. And now you will use the record ID that you have received from the first step. Okay. So let's test whether it works. Let's click run once and let's trigger a new record for Bob. Accepted. We can close the window, and you can see that we have received this information from Airtable. The connection was successful, and here we have retrieved all the information from that particular record. So now we can use this in the next steps. Okay. This is the place when we will add the SendGrid module. And in this case, we are going to use, for the maximum flexibility, we're going to use make an API call. Here again, you need to add a connection to SendGrid, and you click on the add, and then you put the API key for SendGrid. API key for SendGrid can be found in the settings, so let's save this here. Let's go back out of this template. Clicking on settings and API keys will allow you to create new API key. You can go ahead and just select the full access as it's faster, easier, or you can specifically select permissions here, but full access will work fine. Okay, once you enter the API key here, your connection is created, and now what you are going to do is you're going to fill out the URL. The URL will be mail/send. We need to remember to change the method from get to post. And now the most important part is the body of this request to send to SendGrid. So I will copy paste the body that you can also find in this description of the video. It will be a formatted JSON. Okay, it looks a little bit cryptic over here, but do not worry. Let's copy it again from here, and let's use one of the online JSON formatters. Let's say jsonformatter.org, or you can find any other JSON formatter, just so it's easier to see than inside of Integromat. Let's paste this JSON here so it's easier to see. Okay, so now we have that JSON nicely formatted, so you can see with colors what are we talking about. Okay, so the first step is from email. From email needs to be an email that is verified by SendGrid, that comes from your domain. This is something that you can do in SendGrid inside of the settings and inside of the sender authentication. Okay, so this will be your email and your name. Here you can also specify the reply to domain. SendGrid will not accept any replies, so here you can place another email instead. Let's say info@ if you would like to receive replies from that email. The next step is to adjust the template ID. The template ID is something that you find inside of the dynamic templates. Once you go to the template, and here you can copy paste the ID of the template. Okay. Next step will be the personalization. In this case, let's keep it as, for the safety to try, let's keep it as your own email first. So I will do Greg. Later, I'll show you how to use this in a dynamic way. This is the topic of the email, so let's keep it like this. This is basically the part where the dynamic template starts. So let's go back to the SendGrid. Let's open the SendGrid, and here inside of our test data, this is the dynamic template data that will work inside of SendGrid. So let's copy paste this information, and let's replace what I had here in the template. Okay. And at the bottom we have unsubscribe groups. For the time being, let's ignore the unsubscribe groups. So I'll just delete those groups from here. And I need to also delete the last comma, so there's no orphan comma at the end. Okay, so now once you click Format Beautify, you can see that it all processed correctly, means there's no errors, so you can copy this data from here on. From here doesn't really matter. You can now copy this back into Integromat. Okay, and this is where we will start substituting the data. So the first thing, once you see over here, so for the personalization 2, for the email, you will select the email that comes from Airtable. So email address. Make sure that you're testing this first on your email, not the customer, not to irritate people with too many emails. And also don't test it on fake emails, because it will affect your ranking in SendGrid when you have too many bounce emails. For the name, we're also going to use the first name. For the subject, we are going to use the subject line that we have created. And then for the first name, that is the same. And for the text, we are going to use the dynamic text that we have created. So let's start this way first. Okay, so let's give it a go and let's make the first run. So let's start run once. Now we need to trigger this, and we will receive email for Bob onto info@Business Automated with this subject, really appreciate, and so on. Let's click. You can see that execution was successful. Here we got code 202, means message was scheduled for delivery, and let's search this in our inbox. Okay, and this is our email that we have just received with the subject and so on. Now let's add unsubscribe group. As you can see, the default unsubscribe groups are inactive right now, so this is one thing that we'll have to add inside of SendGrid. Let's go back into SendGrid, and inside of suppression, unsubscribe groups, this is where you define what type of groups you have as the emails that you are sending, so that people can unsubscribe rather than from every single email from you, that you give them a choice to unsubscribe from specific types of emails. So you can see that here we have two unsubscribe groups, which is called newsletter and product announcements. So these are the numbers of those unsubscribe groups, and you can also create a new unsubscribe group here, create a new group, and you can put the name that your clients will see what is the group for those particular emails. Okay. And now those unsubscribe groups needs to be added inside of SendGrid in Integromat. So let's go back to our execution. Let's take this information and just copy paste it here so it's a little bit easier to see. So here we have the template ID, and at the very bottom behind the last one we need to add a comma, and we need to add unsubscribe groups. And here we need to put the number of the default group, or sorry, the number of the group that this email belongs to, and here the numbers of all the groups that you give your customer choice to unsubscribe from. So you can see this is 17185, 17186. So these are the two groups that they can unsubscribe from. Okay, so everything looks correct. There's no errors, so it means the structure of the JSON is correct. Let's copy paste this again. Go back to Integromat, copy paste over here. Okay, let's press run once. Let's go back over here and let's maybe customize the subject a little bit. So we will call the subject, make a subject a formula. And we'll say ampersand to connect different strings. Welcome to the club. Okay, this way you'll see that the subject change as well. Okay, accepted. We can see that the execution inside of Integromat was successful, and let's find this email as well. Now you can see that we received email called welcome to the club, and at the very bottom you have unsubscribe group. So either I can unsubscribe from all the groups, or I can select unsubscribe preferences, and this is where you give your customers choice to opt out of selected groups. Okay, let's add two more things to Integromat. So the first let's respond to our URL call to confirm that this email was successfully sent. We'll use for this webhook response. Status 200, 200 is a code for a successful reply. And here we'll say email successfully sent. Okay, and let's also get a visual confirmation in Airtable that this email has been sent. So let's update here a field. Let's create a new field called status, single select, and it will have an option email sent. So now we can add Airtable update a record, select the correct table, and let's use the record ID either from the step 2 or step 1, but let's use the last step, so we're updating the correct record for sure. So this is step 2. Here what we're going to do in the status, we're going to write email sent. If you have not created this status inside of Airtable yet, it will cause an error because it does not exist unless you select smart links, so you'll be able to create any other status, email sent successfully. Okay, and let's run once, and let's send another email to Bob. You can see a reply here from the webhook. Execution here also was successful, and we have the confirmation here that this email was sent out. Now, depending on the use case, you might want to click individually for each email to make sure that you are sending it out, but sometimes you might want to send out more emails in a batch. So for that, there is a different way how to do it. In this case, you would do additional field called emails to be sent. And we are going to call it send email, and this will be a notification for ourselves that if we write send email, this should be the email that should be sent. So we can select send. Let's just delete this confirmation over here, and what we would do, we would create a separate view and filter out only the emails that we have selected to be sent, but at the same time also make sure that once those emails have been sent, they are disappearing from this list. So the status should be empty. Is empty. Okay, and let's call it emails to be sent. Now going back to Integromat, here this scenario is ready. We can basically start it and activate it and let it run. So on the press of the button, the scenario will start sending emails, or we can also go back and we can clone this scenario. And instead of webhook in the beginning, we'll use a different module. We will use search records. Let's change the start from the webhook to here. We can now delete the webhook. It's connected here to the start. And for search records, we will do very simply search all records within specific view. And in the view, we will select emails to be sent. Okay. Let's just test it first to see what it returns. So let's click here. Let's unlock this. Let's connect this from the next module, and let's test the individual module here. Okay. We see that we have received 2 bundles, which matches what we wanted to send over here. So now what we are going to do, we're going to connect this to the next module. Instead of this record ID, we'll be using record ID from the module number 6, the one that starts this scenario. Let's click OK. And we don't need the webhook response right now, so we can delete this module. Everything else stays the same. And we can run once to execute all of them, or we can set a schedule and we can be checking that particular view, let's say daily or every other day of the week or every 15 minutes if we want. For this case, we will just manually run it once so that you can see what happens. So let's click run once. And you can see for every email found, there will be a separate execution. And when we come back, there will be no emails in the view because they all have been sent out and marked as sent successfully over here. You can also see that I have received another email over here. So everything worked out fine. Now, one more caveat to this email. What can happen is that in case you are having a quotation mark inside of the text, this would break the JSON. So this would basically destroy the structure of the JSON inside of Integromat, because when the computer sees quotation mark, it would think that this is the end of the string. So you will not see quotation mark inside of names, but it can happen to be that there's quotation mark in the subject. So you can see that here I basically have placed quotation mark for this particular email. So let's just put more quotation marks. Let's delete this one here and let's show you what will happen. Oh, actually what happened was a different case. If there is no record found in the view, because we did not send email, if there is no record in that view, to avoid errors because Airtable is not finding anything because there is nothing to be found, you need to set a filter, and the filter will be total number of bundles does not equal to 0. Okay, Let's test it again. There's nothing to be sent at the moment. You can see it stops over here. Okay, let's go back and let's send this email. And you can see there was an error inside of SendGrid because it could not properly process the request that we have been sending because of all those additional quotation marks that basically destroy fork the computer understanding of a JSON structure. Okay, so let's close this one here, and to avoid this we will have to do following things. So we'll have to add a module which is called JSON and use transform to JSON. So this object transforms anything into JSON format, which means for a string it basically wraps it in escape clauses so it will not break the JSON. Okay, let's select text, and you can basically see what happens over here. Let's unlink this part for the time being. You can see it basically has created a string with additional backslashes that escape all the quotation marks. So now what we can do, we can go back to linking everything together. And right now, instead of text, we can actually delete the quotation mark because the text from the JSON transformer already comes with the quotation mark. So we can put the JSON string over here, and now we can click OK. And let's run once. Now you can see that this has been successfully processed. It has been marked as sent. And I have also received this email with quotation mark here inside. Okay. If you encounter any problems, just always make sure to check whether the JSON structure is having all the closing brackets or whether it's having all the quotation mark, and if it's not missing any commas or if it doesn't have too many commas. So formatters like this will be very helpful for you because you can see that there is an error and it's not possible to process, and it also gives you which line the error is located. So that's going to be very helpful, and you can see that it was expecting end of the line like this, so it gives you a hint how to fix it and how to correct it. Okay, I hope this video was useful for you guys, and if it was, please subscribe for more business automation content.